The transport ship rattled as it descended through the toxic clouds of Ashmore. Ravenholt gripped the controls, his knuckles white against the worn leather of his pilot seat. 3 years of hauling cargo across the outer territories had taught him to expect the unexpected, but nothing prepared him for what awaited in the underground. Markets of this forsaken world. Ashmore was a planet that existed in the cracks of the law, a place where empires turned a blind eye and morality went to die. The surface was a wasteland of acid storms and jagged rock formations, but beneath the crust lay a sprawling network of caverns that housed the most notorious black market in 7 systems. Raven had delivered here before, dropping off sealed containers and asking no questions. That was the rule. Keep your head down, take your credits, and leave. But today was different. Today, desperation had brought him deeper into the darkness than ever before. His ship touched down on a crude landing platform carved from volcanic stone. A docking fee alone cost him half his remaining savings, but the repair bills waiting back on Haven Station demanded payment. Without those repairs, his ship would be grounded permanently. And a grounded pilot was a dead pilot in this part of space. Raven sealed his coat against the sulfuric air that leaked through the atmospheric shield and descended the ramp. The market sprawled before him like a mechanical hive, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds moving through corridors lit by bioluminescent fungi and flickering energy lamps. The smell hit him first, a mixture of exotic spices, burning metals, and something organic that made his stomach turn. He navigated through stalls selling everything from forbidden weapons to genetic modifications. Vendors called out in a dozen languages, their voices blending into a cacophony that echoed off the cavern walls. Raven kept his hand near the plasma pistol hidden beneath his coat, eyes scanning for threats. In places like this, showing weakness was an invitation to violence. A holographic banner caught his attention, floating above a crowd that had gathered near the eastern galleries. The words pulsed in standard tongue alongside alien scripts. Special auction tonight. Rare acquisitions. Highest bidders only. Curiosity pulled at him. Auctions in the deep markets usually meant something illegal, even by their loose standards. He had time before his meeting with the parts dealer, and rumors in the market were often worth more than credits. Information was currency here, and knowledge of what moved through these channels could mean the difference between profit and disaster. The auction hall was smaller than he expected, carved into a natural chamber where stalactites hung like teeth from the ceiling. Perhaps 200 beings packed the space, a mixture of wealthy collectors, crime lords, and desperate gamblers. Raven found a spot near the back, partially hidden behind a pillar of red stone. The auctioneer was a Threxian, its 4 arms gesturing dramatically as it presented items on a central platform. First came a collection of pre-war artifacts, then a crate of military-grade weapons, followed by data chips containing classified information. The bidding was fierce, voices shouting numbers that made Raven's head spin. Then the atmosphere changed. The lights dimmed, and a hushed anticipation fell over the crowd. The Threxian's voice dropped to a dramatic whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the hall. Honored bidders, what we present now is beyond rare. It is singular, a living treasure from a dying race. Guards wheeled out a containment pod, transparent and roughly the size of a human torso. Inside, suspended in a gentle blue field, was a figure that made Raven's breath catch. She was tiny, barely reaching what would be his waist if she stood. Her skin held an ethereal quality, shifting between shades of silver and pale violet like moonlight on water. Her features were delicate, almost fragile, with large eyes that shimmered like polished amethyst. Hair the color of starlight fell around her shoulders, and despite the containment field, despite the chains of energy that bound her wrists and ankles, she held herself with a dignity that silenced the room. A Valerian, the auctioneer announced with greedy satisfaction. The last of her kind, salvaged from the ruins of their world. Genetic analysis confirms her unique biology. She requires minimal sustenance, possesses remarkable intelligence, and according to our research, her people were capable of forming deep empathic bonds with other species. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Raven had heard stories of the Valerians, a peaceful race that had refused to take sides during the border wars. Their neutrality had made them targets, and their homeworld had been caught in crossfire that turned it to ash. He thought they were all gone. Her eyes moved across the crowd, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, they locked with his. There was no pleading in that gaze, no desperation. Instead, he saw something that shook him to his core. Recognition. As if she had been waiting for him, specifically to walk into this cursed place. Bidding starts at 50,000 credits, the Threxian declared. The price was astronomical. Raven had maybe 8,000 to his name, and most of that was already spoken for. He should walk away. He should leave this place and forget what he had seen. Getting involved in something like this was suicide, but her eyes found his again, and this time he saw something else. Not a plea, but a question. A test, perhaps. Would he be like all the others who saw her as property, as a curiosity to be owned? Or would he see her as what she truly was, a living being trapped in a nightmare not of her making? The bidding climbed rapidly. 20,000, 30, 40. The voices came from shadowed figures in private boxes. Beings whose wealth made Raven's entire existence seem insignificant. 60,000, 70. The price soared beyond reason. His hand moved before his mind could stop it, before logic could intervene, before survival instinct could pull him back from the edge. 100,000 credits, Raven heard himself say. The hall went silent. Heads turned. The auctioneer's eyes widened in what might have been shock or delight. The human bids 100,000, it announced, voice rising. Do I hear 110? Silence stretched. The other bidders seemed to reassess, perhaps wondering what this nobody cargo pilot knew that they did not. Or perhaps they simply sensed the madness in his bid and wanted no part of it. 100,000 going once. The auctioneer's voice filled the chamber. Going twice. Raven's heart hammered against his ribs. What had he done? He did not have 100,000 credits. He did not have a fraction of that. This would destroy him. The hammer fell. Sold to the human in the back. The crowd dispersed quickly, already moving on to the next spectacle. Guards approached Raven with practiced efficiency, leading him to a private chamber where transactions were completed. The Threxian auctioneer followed, its multiple hands already preparing documentation. An impressive bid, it said, mandibles clicking with amusement. Payment is due immediately, of course. We accept credit transfers, rare materials, or service contracts. Raven's mind raced. I need to make arrangements. My assets are not liquid at the moment. The Threxian's eyes narrowed. You bid without means? That is very unwise, human. Very unwise indeed. Give me 24 hours, Raven said, forcing steel into his voice. I have holdings that can cover this. I just need time to liquidate them. It was a complete lie. He had nothing. But in that moment, with her eyes watching him from the containment pod they had brought into the room, he could not bring himself to care about the consequences. The Threxian studied him for a long moment, then made a sound that might have been a laugh. You have 12 hours. If payment is not received, you will take her place in the next auction. We always collect our debts, one way or another. The guards left, sealing the door behind them. Raven stood alone with the containment pod, his heart still racing from the insanity of what he had just done. He approached slowly, carefully, and pressed his hand against the transparent surface. Up close, he could see the faint luminescence of her skin, the way her hair seemed to move in an invisible current. She was even more beautiful than he had first realized, but it was not her appearance that held him captive. It was the intelligence in her eyes, the strength that radiated from such a small frame. "I do not know what I am doing," he admitted quietly. "I cannot pay for you. I just condemned myself trying to save you. But I could not walk away. I could not leave you here." She tilted her head slightly, and though the containment field muffled sound, he heard her voice, soft and melodic like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "Then we will find another way together. Word count, 1,502 words. Would you like me to continue with part 2? The containment field dissolved with a whisper of discharged energy, and Xyrith stepped onto the cold stone floor of the chamber. Raven watched as she steadied herself, her small frame swaying slightly after what must have been hours suspended in stasis. She was even tinier than he had realized, the top of her head barely reaching his chest. Her movements were graceful despite her obvious disorientation, each step deliberate and controlled. "Can you walk?" Raven asked, already calculating their escape route. 12 hours was not much time, but it was enough to get off this rock if they moved fast. Xyrith nodded, her amethyst eyes studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You have made a terrible bargain for yourself, Raven Holt." He froze. "How do you know my name?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Your credentials were scanned when you entered the auction hall. I accessed the market's database through the containment field's network. Your ship registration, your debts, your history. Everything." She paused, tilting her head. "You were a military pilot once, decorated, then dishonorably discharged for refusing orders. Now you scrape by on cargo runs that barely cover fuel costs." Raven felt heat rise in his face. "If you know all that, then you know I cannot pay for you. Which means we need to leave. Now." "Agreed." Xyrith moved toward the door with surprising speed. "The auction house has 17 exit points, but only 3 are not monitored at this hour. The service tunnels beneath the eastern galleries connect to the landing platforms. If we move quickly, we can reach your ship before they realize you have no intention of paying." He stared at her. "You learned the layout too?" "I had nothing else to do while waiting to be sold." Her voice carried a hint of bitterness. "My people were scholars and engineers before we became extinct curiosities. Pattern recognition and spatial memory are innate abilities." Raven pulled his plasma pistol and checked the charge. "Stay close to me. If shooting starts, get behind cover and let me handle it." Xyrith said nothing, but he caught the flash of something in her eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or maybe pity. They moved through the corridors in silence, Raven leading while Xyrith navigated with whispered directions. The market was quieter now, most vendors closing their stalls as the station's artificial night cycle began. The few beings they passed paid them little attention. In a place like this, minding your own business was the key to survival. The service tunnels were exactly where Xyrith said they would be, hidden behind a false wall in an abandoned storage bay. The passage was narrow and dark, lit only by emergency strips that flickered with dying power. Water dripped from somewhere above, and the air tasted of rust and decay. "How much further?" Raven whispered. 200 meters, then a vertical shaft leading to the platform level. Xyrith moved beside him now, her luminescent skin providing a soft glow that made navigation easier. "Raven, when we reach your ship, they will pursue us. The Syndicate does not forgive debts. I know." He had known the moment he raised his hand. This was not just about credits anymore. He had insulted them, made them look foolish. They would hunt him to the edges of known space if necessary. "Do you regret this? Would you rather I left you there?" She stopped walking, forcing him to halt as well. In the dim light, her features seemed almost otherworldly, too perfect to be real. My people had a saying, "The greatest prison is not made of walls, but of choices we refuse to make." You made a choice today, despite knowing it would destroy you. That is not something to regret. Before Raven could respond, alarms shrieked through the tunnels. Red emergency lights blazed to life, bathing everything in crimson. "They know," Xyrith said calmly. "Run." They sprinted through the remaining tunnel, boots splashing through puddles of stagnant water. Behind them, Raven heard the heavy footfalls of security teams entering the passage. Shouts echoed off the walls. Orders barked in multiple languages. The vertical shaft appeared ahead, a crude elevator system used for cargo transport. Raven slammed the activation panel, and the platform began its grinding ascent. Too slow. They were moving far too slow. Energy blasts scorched the air around them as the first guards rounded the corner. Raven returned fire, his shots forcing them to take cover. Xyrith pressed herself against the shaft wall, her eyes wide, but her breathing steady. "Hold on," Raven growled, wrapping one arm around her waist. With his free hand, he aimed upward and fired at the cable mechanism. The blast severed the safety catch, and the platform lurched violently before rocketing toward the surface at dangerous speed. They burst through the shaft opening onto the landing platform level, the platform crashing to a stop with a screech of tortured metal. Raven grabbed Xyrith's hand and ran, weaving between parked ships and cargo containers. His vessel sat 3 platforms away, its battered hull a welcome sight. More guards poured from access hatches, cutting off their direct route. Raven changed direction, pulling Xyrith toward a maintenance catwalk that spanned the gap between platforms. Energy blasts peppered the metal around them, superheating the air. "Jump!" Raven shouted as they reached his ship's platform. They leaped together, hitting the rough stone hard. Pain shot through Raven's shoulder, but adrenaline kept him moving. His ship's ramp was already lowering, responding to his neural link. They scrambled aboard as plasma fire scorched the hull. Raven practically threw Xyrith into the co-pilot seat before diving into his own chair. His hands flew across the controls, muscle memory from his military days taking over. Engines roared to life, and the ship lurched skyward even as guards reached the ramp. The toxic atmosphere of Ashmore streaked past the viewport as they climbed. Pursuit ships launched behind them, their weapons hot. Raven pushed the throttles to maximum, the ship groaning in protest. It was old, held together more by prayer than engineering, but it was fast when it needed to be. "Hold tight," he warned, throwing the ship into a barrel roll that dodged incoming fire. The maneuver sent loose items flying through the cabin. Xyrith gripped her seat, but made no sound of fear. They broke through the cloud layer into open space, but their problems were far from over. 3 pursuit ships maintained formation, herding them away from the jump points. More were launching from Ashmore's orbital stations. "We cannot outrun them," Xyrith observed, her voice remarkably calm. "No, but we can outmaneuver them." Raven grinned despite the situation. "Strap in properly. This is about to get rough." He dove toward Ashmore's largest moon, a barren rock barely held together by its own weak gravity. The pursuit ships followed, their superior speed closing the distance. Raven waited until the last possible moment, then cut engines completely. The ship tumbled end over end, momentum carrying them toward the moon's surface. The pursuing vessels shot past, unable to match the sudden change in velocity. Raven fired maneuvering thrusters, spinning the ship around, and reignited the main engines at full burn. They skimmed the moon's surface so close that rocks, kicked up by their passage, pinned against the hull. Behind them, 2 pursuit ships tried to follow, but misjudged the approach. One clipped the surface and exploded in a ball of fire. The other pulled up too late, its underside grinding against rock before it spun out of control. The third ship was smarter, maintaining altitude and repositioning for a clean shot. Raven jinked left and right, but his ship was slower now, engines overheating from the abuse. "Raven," Zyrith said softly, "let me help. What can you possibly do?" He snapped, immediately regretting his tone. She did not answer with words. Instead, she reached out and placed her small hand on the console. Her skin began to glow brighter, pulsing with light that spread across the ship's systems like living circuitry. The engine readings on Raven's display shifted, power redistributing in ways that should not be possible. "My people were engineers," Zyrith said, her voice distant. "We understood technology, not as separate from life, but as an extension of it. Everything has patterns, rhythms. I can feel them, adjust them." The ship surged forward with renewed power, speed increasing beyond its rated specifications. The overheating warnings vanished, replaced by optimal efficiency readings. Raven stared in disbelief as they pulled away from the pursuit ship, leaving it behind like it was standing still. They reached the jump point and engaged the hyperdrive. Space twisted around them, stars stretching into lines of light as they entered the void between systems. Only when the jump was complete and they were safely in hyperspace did Raven allow himself to breathe. He looked at Zyrith, who had pulled her hand away from the console. The glow faded from her skin, leaving her looking exhausted. "What are you?" he asked quietly. "I am the last Valerian," she replied, leaning back in her seat. "My people could interface with technology through bioelectric fields. We built our civilization by harmonizing with our machines rather than commanding them. It is why we were hunted. Others wanted to weaponize our abilities, to force us to serve their wars. Is that what happened to your world?" Pain flickered across her delicate features. "The Kryn Collective demanded we build weapons for them, ships that could be controlled through thought alone, unstoppable fleets bound to living pilots. When we refused, they made examples of us. They burned our cities, took our children for experimentation. Those who survived scattered across the galaxy, hunted like animals." She closed her eyes. The refueling station at Gamma Outpost was a forgotten relic floating in the void, between civilized space and the lawless frontier. Its rusted hull bore the scars of 100 small conflicts, plasma burns and hull breaches patched with whatever materials were available. But it asked no questions, kept no records. And that made it perfect for people like Raven, who needed to disappear. He guided his ship into one of the aging docking bays, the magnetic clamps engaging with a metallic groan that made Zyrith flinch. She had grown more relaxed over their weeks together, but unfamiliar places still put her on edge. Raven could not blame her. Every station, every port, could be the one where their luck ran out. "Stay close," he said, checking his pistol before securing it in his holster. "We get fuel, supplies, and leave. No lingering." Zyrith nodded, pulling up the hood of the jacket he had given her. It was far too large, drowning her small frame, but it concealed her distinctive features. In the dim light of the station, she might pass for a human child at first glance. Not perfect, but it would have to do. The station's interior was as decrepit as its exterior. Flickering lights cast shadows that moved with lives of their own. The air recyclers wheezed with every breath they pushed through the corridors. A handful of beings occupied the common area, most hunched over drinks that probably cost more than they were worth. Eyes tracked Raven and Zyrith as they passed, but no one moved to intercept them. The supply depot was managed by a Grindix, a hulking species known for their strength and surprising business acumen. This one had cybernetic enhancements covering half its face, the metal glinting dully in the poor lighting. "Fuel and food," Raven said, sliding a credit chip across the counter. "Enough for a long journey." The Grendix scanned the chip, its mechanical eye whirring as it processed the information. This is barely enough for half what you are asking. It is all I have. The creature studied them both, its gaze lingering on Zyrith's hidden face. There are people looking for someone matching your description. Human, traveling with a small companion. The bounty is substantial. Raven's hand moved toward his pistol, but the Grendix raised a massive hand. Peace, traveler. I did not say I would collect it. Bounty hunters are bad for business. They shoot first and damage my station. But information like this has value. What do you want? You have a ship. I have cargo that needs to reach the colonies beyond Helix Nebula. No questions about contents, no inspections. You deliver, I give you enough fuel and supplies for 3 months, plus enough credits to disappear properly. It was a trap. Every instinct Raven had developed over years of survival screamed at him to refuse. But they needed those supplies desperately, and his credit chip was nearly empty. What is the cargo? Medical supplies. Vaccines for a colony suffering from Raxian fever. Legal, but the corporations control distribution and charge prices the colonists cannot afford. Someone has to bypass the official channels. Raven glanced at Zyrith, who gave the slightest nod. She trusted his judgment, but he could see the concern in her eyes. How do I know you are telling the truth? The Grendix's mechanical eye clicked as it focused. You do not. But you are out of options, and I am offering you a lifeline. Take it or leave it, but decide quickly. Those bounty hunters are not far behind. Fine, load the cargo. 2 hours later, they were back in hyperspace with a hold full of sealed containers and enough supplies to last them months. Raven plotted a course that would take them through the most remote systems he knew, adding weeks to their journey, but minimizing their chances of detection. Zyrith sat in the co-pilot seat, her hood pulled back now that they were alone. Her silver hair caught the light from the console displays, giving her an ethereal appearance that made Raven's heart ache. Over the past weeks, his feelings had evolved from protectiveness into something deeper. Something that terrified him with its intensity. You think it was a trap, she said softly. Everything is a trap until proven otherwise. He adjusted their course slightly, avoiding a registered shipping lane. But we did not have a choice. We always have choices, Raven. Some are just harder than others. He looked at her, this tiny being who had somehow become the center of his universe. Do you regret coming with me? You could have stayed at the station, found someone else to take you somewhere safe. Zyrith reached across the space between their seats and took his hand. Her fingers were delicate, but strong, her skin warm against his. There is nowhere in the galaxy I would rather be than here with you, even if we are running for the rest of our lives. The words should have felt like a burden, but instead they filled him with a fierce determination. He would keep her safe. Whatever it took, however long it took, he would find them a place where they could simply exist without fear. Days blended into weeks as they traveled deeper into the frontier. They passed dead worlds and dying stars, remnants of civilizations that had risen and fallen before humanity ever reached the stars. The isolation should have been maddening, but instead it felt like freedom. Zyrith continued to amaze him with her abilities. She interfaced with the ship's systems daily now, optimizing everything from life support to navigation. The vessel ran better than it had in years, responding to commands with an eagerness that seemed almost alive. I think your ship likes me, she said one evening, her hand resting on the console as light pulsed beneath her palm. It should. You have done more for it in a month than I managed in 3 years. Raven watched from the doorway of the cockpit, a cup of coffee warming his hands. How does it work exactly? The interface thing? Zyrith considered the question, her expression thoughtful. Imagine if you could hear the heartbeat of everything around you. The rhythm of engines, the flow of power through circuits, the vibration of metal under stress. My people evolved to sense these patterns, to understand them instinctively. When I touch a machine, I am not controlling it. I am listening to it, understanding what it needs, helping it become what it is meant to be. That is beautiful, Raven said quietly, and terrifying. I understand now why others wanted to weaponize it. Darkness crossed her features. The Kryn collective tried. They captured my people, tortured them, forced them to bond with weapons of war. But the bond requires willingness. You cannot force harmony. The machines they created were unstable, dangerous to everyone, including their operators. So they decided if they could not use us, no one could. Raven set down his coffee and moved to her side, pulling her into his arms. She fit perfectly against his chest, her head resting over his heart. I am sorry your people suffered. I am sorry the universe is so cruel. The universe is not cruel, Zyrith murmured. It simply is. Cruelty comes from choice, from beings who decide their desires matter more than the lives of others. But kindness also comes from choice. Your choice to save me, even when it meant destroying yourself. That matters more than all the cruelty combined. They stood like that for a long time, two beings from different worlds finding comfort in each other's presence. When they finally parted, Zyrith looked up at him with eyes that held both sadness and hope. Raven, I need to tell you something. My people had another ability, one we kept hidden because it was sacred. We could bond with other beings, not just machines. A true bond where thoughts and emotions flowed between souls. It happened rarely, only when two beings were truly compatible. His heart began to race. What are you saying? I have felt it growing between us. Every day, every moment we spend together, the connection deepens. Soon it will be complete, and when it is, we will be bound for life. Our lifespans will synchronize. My emotions will affect you, and yours will affect me. We will never be truly separate again. Raven should have been frightened. This was beyond anything he had imagined, a permanence that transcended normal relationships. But as he looked into her amethyst eyes, he felt only certainty. I want that, he said firmly. Whatever it means, whatever it costs. I want to be bound to you. Tears shimmered in her eyes. You do not understand the full implications. If one of us dies, the other will feel it, carry that pain forever. We will share not just joy but suffering. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything. She smiled then, radiant and heartbreaking. Then let it happen naturally. The bond will complete itself when we are both ready. But fate had other plans. 2 days later, alarms shrieked through the ship as they dropped out of hyperspace for a scheduled fuel stop. 3 Syndicate warships materialized from the darkness, surrounding them with practiced precision. Raven, halt, a voice crackled over the communication system. You have something that belongs to us. Surrender the Valerian, and we will let you live. Refuse, and we will take her from your wreckage. Raven's hands flew across the controls, but he knew they were outmatched. His ship was fast, but lightly armed, no match for military-grade warships. Hold on, he told Zyrith, pushing the engines to maximum. They dove toward the nearest planet, a gas giant with storms that raged across its surface. The warships followed, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns. Shields flared and buckled under the assault. Hull plating began to peel away. Raven, we cannot outrun them, Zyrith said, her voice steady despite the chaos. I know, but maybe we can lose them in the storm layer. It was insane, the kind of maneuver that got pilots killed. The magnetic fields and lightning storms of a gas giant could tear apart even heavily shielded vessels. But they had no other choice. They plunged into the atmosphere, the ship bucking violently as winds strong enough to shred metal grabbed hold. Lightning arced across their hull, energy readings spiking dangerously. Two of the warships pulled away, unwilling to risk the descent. But the third followed, its commander either brave or foolish. Xyrith placed her hand on the console, her skin blazing with light. The ship responded to her touch, shields reinforcing in critical areas, engines adjusting to compensate for the impossible forces acting upon them. They dove deeper, into layers of atmosphere where pressure alone should have crushed them. The warship behind them was not as fortunate. Its shields failed catastrophically, and the last thing Raven saw in his rear display was the vessel crumpling like paper before vanishing into the storm dot. They emerged on the far side of the planet, battered but intact. The two remaining warships repositioned, cutting off escape vectors. Raven checked his weapon systems, knowing they would barely scratch military-grade shields. "I'm sorry," he said to Xyrith. "I thought we would have more time." She unbuckled from her seat and moved to stand beside him. "Raven, there is one more thing my people could do. Something I hoped never to use again." "What?" "We could project our consciousness through technology, take control of systems remotely. It was how we defended ourselves before the wars. But it requires immense energy, and it will leave me vulnerable." She placed both hands on the console, her entire body beginning to glow. "When I do this, you must protect my physical form. Promise me." "Xyrith, what are you going to do?" "What I was born to do, harmonize." Light exploded from her, flooding the cockpit with radiance, so bright Raven had to shield his eyes. He felt rather than saw her consciousness expand, reaching out through space itself. The ship's systems went wild, power flowing in patterns that defied logic. Through the viewport, he watched in awe as the two warships suddenly jerked to a halt. Their engines fired erratically, weapons powering down and restarting in confusion. Inside those vessels, Xyrith was speaking to their machines, showing them a different path, convincing them that their operators were wrong. One warship's engines overloaded, forcing an emergency shutdown. The other began spinning slowly, its navigational systems compromised beyond recovery. But the effort was destroying Xyrith. Her small body trembled, skin flickering between brilliant light and alarming darkness. Blood trickled from her nose, her eyes unfocused. "Enough!" Raven shouted, grabbing her shoulders. "Xyrith, stop. You are killing yourself." She collapsed into his arms, the light fading. Her breathing was shallow, her heartbeat irregular. Raven carried her to the small medical bay, his hands shaking as he activated the diagnostic scanner. The readings were catastrophic. Her body was shutting down, unable to sustain the energy output she had channeled. "No," Raven whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. "You do not get to die. Not after everything. Not when I finally found you." Her eyes fluttered open, barely focused. "The bond," she whispered. "Complete it. Let our life forces merge. It is the only way. I do not know how. Just hold me. Want it with everything you are." Raven pulled her against his chest, closing his eyes and focusing every ounce of his will on the connection he felt building between them. He thought of every moment they had shared, every laugh and conversation, every touch that made his soul sing. He poured his life force into her, giving everything without reservation. The bond snapped into place like a physical thing. And suddenly he was not alone in his own mind. He felt Xyrith there, her presence warm and bright, her pain and fear mixing with his own. Their hearts synchronized, beating as one. Their thoughts tangled and merged while still remaining distinct. Her eyes opened fully, color returning to her features. The diagnostic readings stabilized, improved, began showing normal functions. They breathed together, existed together, two beings now fundamentally linked in ways that transcended biology. "I feel you," Xyrith whispered in wonder. your strength, your determination. It is beautiful. I feel you too, Raven said, tears streaming down his face. Your courage, your hope, even after everything you lost. You are the strongest being I have ever known. They held each other as the ship drifted through space, the disabled warships falling away behind them. Eventually, Raven set course for the Helix colonies, where rumors spoke of settlements that welcomed refugees and asked no questions about the past. Whatever came next, they would face it together, bound not by chains or obligation, but by a choice freely made. One gesture in an auction house had sealed his fate, but in doing so, it had given him something he never thought possible. A future worth fighting for, a love that transcended stars, and a partner who would walk beside him through whatever darkness the universe held. Their souls intertwined until the very end of time. 3 months later, they landed on a small agricultural colony on the edge of mapped space. The settlers there needed engineers, and Raven's piloting skills were always in demand. They built a small home on the outskirts of the main settlement. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof. But it was theirs. Xyrith worked wonders with the colony's aging equipment, her abilities making her invaluable to the community. She never revealed her full nature, and Raven never spoke of their past. To the colonists, they were simply a couple who had come seeking peace. And in the frontier, that was question enough answered. Some nights, they would sit on their porch and watch the binary sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and violet. Xyrith would rest her head on Raven's shoulder, and through their bond, they would share thoughts too deep for words. "Do you think they will ever stop looking?" she asked one evening. "Probably not," Raven admitted. "But out here, we have something more valuable than safety. We have each other, and we have choice. Every day we choose this life, and that makes it real." Xyrith smiled, her luminescent skin glowing softly in the fading light. One gesture changed everything. You raised your hand when everyone else looked away. That single choice rippled across the universe and brought us here. "Best decision I ever made," Raven said, pulling her closer. "Even if it damned me, it would still be worth it." "You are not damned," Xyrith whispered, rising to kiss him. "You are saved." "We both are." And as the stars emerged overhead, countless points of light in the eternal darkness, 2 souls bound by choice and strengthened by love looked toward a future they would build together, one moment at a time.